It's a real pleasure for me to be able to perform this introduction today. I asked John if there were anything particular he would like me to say, and he said no, just to keep it short. However, I thought if I just said, "and help me welcome Mayor John Gatto," you would feel a little disappointed or shortchanged. So I'll share with you just a couple of things. John hails from San Francisco. He's very proud of his Italian heritage. He has a BS in architecture from the University of California at Berkeley. He came to Cupertino in 1962. He was on the Planning Commission from 1972 until 1980. He was elected in 1980 to the City Council, did such a good job he ran unopposed in 1985. He was first mayor in 1982-83 and is mayor now the second time. He has planned so well that during his mayorship, the first time and now the second time, we are celebrating 5-year intervals of our relationship with Toyokawa, so he gets to be the very important person at these functions. He cares a great deal about the city of Cupertino. He does his homework, he's responsive, he casts the unpopular vote when he thinks he should. He has a great sense of humor. Would you please help me welcome the mayor of Cupertino, John Gatto.
Well, I tell you, after this introduction and the previous presentation of these two young ladies, this is a real tough act to follow, and Herman keeps telling me how important this is. I don't know. The only thing I can say is I still see rolls on the table. I was hoping they'd had those clear by the time we got to this part of the presentation. Also, Debbie, you see, I got the foreseen in the distance. Well, it's really a true pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the Chamber's invitation. Allows me to talk about one of my most favorite subjects, which is the city of Cupertino. And I also would like to just take a moment at this time. I noticed we have some of the other council members here, and I don't know if they're coming to see if I'm not going to give away the store or tell secrets, but I would like to at least introduce them and acknowledge their presence. So we have John Plungy, who is the present vice mayor, and Barbara Koppel. Excuse me. And Barbara Koppel, who is our newly elected council member. Barbara, would you stand again? And I want to thank Barbara especially for that very nice and warm introduction. Barbara, thank you very much. I think one of the real joys in being on the council in Cupertino is represented both by that introduction of the other council members and by the people in the room here today. This is a really great community, and I think the essence of the community are in its people. The chief resource that any community has when the bottom line is drawn is its people. And just the other night, we went and celebrated the Citizen of the Year Award, and the Chamber put on a very lovely function at that. And when they brought up the past recipients of that award, and you looked around the room and read through the program of those that had received the award, you recognize just how blessed the city is. And the Chamber by itself is a very important resource. I mean, there are a lot of people in this room that are business people, true, and that's their affiliation with the Chamber. But you also belong to service clubs, you sponsor recreational programs, you just do a myriad of things that bring you part of the community. And it's almost like you're involved in little circles. Each table here was a little circle, but the circles join and link, and that linkage provides the real strength and the backbone of the community. Well, today's topic is supposed to be on the state of the city. And usually the state of the city looks at a snapshot in time of where we are in our evolution. And I think in order to put this discussion in some perspective, I'd like to think of more of the movie and wind back the reel and look back at some of the things that have occurred over the last 30 or 40 years that have helped shape and direct where we are today. I think it's important to do that so we can put in perspective some of the things that are present today, and we can analyze or better appreciate how we got where we got, and maybe some of the problems and some of the benefits that we're experiencing today have a little more meaning when they're viewed in context. I'd like to begin that quick review really at the end of the Second World War. We, at that time, were a very city-oriented society. San Jose was a town of 45,000 people. Cupertino wasn't even a glimmer. What happened was that people came back from the war, there was this immediate emergence to suburbs. This whole phenomena of suburbia began at that point. That was really the genesis of this whole Santa Clara Valley and its growth. As that genesis increased and more land was being put into housing, that housing sort of started in downtown San Jose and started working its way out in many directions from Sunnyvale, from sunny San Jose. And there were a number of property owners, major property owners in the Cupertino area, then yet Cupertino, who thought, this is not what we want to see for our future. And so they banded together and really began the incorporative efforts, which was our heritage. Without that foresight, this meeting today and meeting the future president, which is very nice, would not be possible. So, you know, what seems like a fairly perfunctory act, which is incorporate the city, took people with vision to do that. Without that vision, we wouldn't be here today. So sometimes you don't appreciate the true effort of what are sometimes classified as pioneers. But without them, this wouldn't be here. So the incorporation of the city in 1955 was a major milestone. Shortly thereafter, the whole Valco assemblage took place. And quite frankly, I think that's one of the very early visionary land use planning efforts that was ever accomplished in this valley. If you look at the acreage that's assembled under that umbrella and the vision that that group had in basically creating a regional hub within this community, way back when there was no region, has been a very strong focal point for this growth of this community. Where 280 passes and the linkage with this community to all of the region is the direct result of some of those early efforts. So that land block was put together. In the early 70s, there were a number of events that occurred that really shaped the future of the city. There was the beginning of a goals group that was put together that started to look at where are we going? What is the city's future path? And that goals group had representation of maybe 130, 140 people as it began and distilled down. And the net result, which wasn't that surprising because when you take that diverse a group, you tend to come to common denominators, was that we would seek what the word was called a balanced community. And to me, what that meant was that we wanted a community that provided all the opportunities and the diversity for both jobs and housing, employment, recreation. There wasn't to be a stratified community, but rather one that embodied and accepted virtually any type of endeavor that one wanted to pursue. The future planning efforts, both in general plans and specific plans that help shape the community in very specific bases, I think always went back to that balanced design. Do we want to stress one area or the other? Do we want to try and focus on one type of housing or one type of job opportunity? And the answer always seemed to be no. Let's go for the more broad spectrum. Let's try and increase the opportunities. Let's try and make this truly the land where anyone that wants to fulfill an ambition has an opportunity to do so. And I think that has held true for the last 25 years. Also in the early 70s, there was a movement that was called the Green Foothills. There was, with this rapid growth that was occurring, the whole hillsides were prime land for taking for expansion of the urban sprawl, the suburban sprawl. And not only in this community, but throughout the whole county, there became a consciousness of maybe we better take a long look at what's happening with the hills and maybe make some direction. Well, as part of that goals committee, early planning efforts, the results of the Green Foothills was a drastic rethinking of how the foothills are being used, and with that, a drastic reduction in the density of the foothills. I can share with you that in 1969, the expected population of Cupertino, with the persons that were sitting in the early goals committee, was 100,000 people. That was what we felt that would be sort of the upper limit of growth in this community. When as discussion went on and it said, well, where are we going to put these people, it sort of backed off to maybe 60,000 people with reasonable densities at that point. The Green Foothill addition to that determination basically cut it down to about a 40,000 population limit. Now, one of the other things that's happened in this community, and it happened in the late 70s, was the annexation of a good portion of San Jose. There were some 15,000 people, John, from the San Jose area were annexed, and that's basically the area west of De Anza Boulevard. And we might thank our ex-mayor, Mr. Jackson, here for leading the charge in that whole movement. But you got to recognize there's 15,000 people in that block that were not counted in the earlier program. So what we really have now is a population of close to 40,000 people. You subtract that 15,000, we're at 25,000, probably going to grow another 3,000 or 4,000 with available housing stock, when early expectations 20 years ago were 60,000, 70,000 people. So you can get a flavor of where the density ranges have shifted over that period of time. Now, the city is only as good as its people, as I said earlier, and I think that one of the key ingredients of any city is its city manager and the staff that help support him. In 1971, Bob Quinlan came to this city, and I think we've been very blessed with that addition. He is probably the premier city manager, if not in the state, if not in the country, at least in the state. And I noticed that there are a lot of his staff people here, and without naming names and going down the whole list, I know that Bob has done a great job of surrounding himself with great staff, and that group is what runs your city and what makes it the city that it is. So I just take a moment to acknowledge the staff that's here. I also might add, apparently, they were ordered to come and they have to applaud. Okay. The next big issue that arose in the early 70s was the whole idea of a regional shopping center. And those of you that were around in those days remember the 40 or 50 meetings at the Planning Commission and the 40 or 50 meetings at the City Council with packed auditoriums trying to decide the issue of, number one, should there be a regional shopping center within Cupertino? And number two, if we are going to have them, where should it be? You know, looking back, and Valco's been in position now, it's been very successful and an important part of the community for all these years, and it's hard to imagine a time when that question would have ever even been asked. But I can tell you very seriously that there were some extremely lengthy and always volatile deliberations to determine that question. And I think the outfall of that, if Valco had not been approved, if a regional shopping center had not been placed in Cupertino, our financial posture today would be tremendously different than it is. One of the benefits that this community enjoys today is the sales tax that comes from that facility. It makes the city very fiscally sound. It would not have taken much. In fact, there were 3-2 votes at both the Planning Commission and the Council to have the shopping center located in Cupertino. One vote the other way, and it could have gone in Sunnyvale. We probably would have experienced all of the supposed headaches at that point and none of the revenue. And I can tell you quite honestly that without that in place, the fiscal quality of this city would be tremendously different. So again, decisions that are made in the past affect how you're able to function in the present. As I mentioned earlier, the bulk of the city has as its basic guidelines a general plan. And the general plan is that it's just that, it's a guideline. It's a framework in which you want to weave the fabric of the city. And the general plans are an evolving document. They change and they're modified. But I think as they go along, they represent the thrusts that were first put together under that goals committee and the directions that came out of that. Up to now, the majority of the general plan effort has been basically dealing with the physical environment. How much building can you put where? Should there be a diversity in architectural style? What should heights be? Things of that sort. In the early 80s and late 70s, there were a number of general plan efforts that were followed one after the other that were sort of viewed as a 15 or 20-year blueprint for the physical development of this city. What we've seen over the last 5 years has been basically a compression of that growth expectations, which would have been taking place maybe in 15 years. The rapid growth in the whole Silicon Valley has just manifested itself in one small area in Cupertino. We're not isolated. We cannot be a separate entity from what's happening in our region. The economy of our region, the growth of our region, we feel that. We're affected by it. If the pressures in the region are such that create a growth pattern that accelerates, we also experience that same pressure, and our growth tends to be comparable to that. So there has been a tremendous amount of building that has taken place in this city in the last 5 years, which is a direct result of some of those overall regional pressures for the growth and the expansion of the whole silicone industry. So where are we now? I think where we are right now is in great shape. I think that the city is healthy, dynamic, fiscally sound, has a wonderful resource of community, and as you travel around this city and partake in different activities, you keep meeting either new people or similar people, and you find an energy level, seemingly a desire to want to participate and support the community that is very unique. I've had an opportunity to visit other cities for different other opinions, and particularly when you go to league functions or national functions and you hear of all the problems and all of the discord that occurs in the cities, I can tell you quite frankly, this is a very, very healthy, pleasant city to be functioning in. And I know I can speak for the rest of the council members when I say that our job is so much nicer because of all of you who make the city that wonderful resource to work from. The Chronicle did a poll, and I guess it came out a couple weeks ago in the paper. And what they did is they polled citizens in various groups throughout the Bay Area and asking their perceptions of their community and other communities, and based it on schools, recreational activities, service levels, fiscal, your impression of the community. And Cupertino came out 4th in that whole Bay Area. I think there's something like 60 cities. And I think that's an excellent demonstration of both how we view ourselves and how the rest of the community, the region, views the quality and ability of this city to function. So I think that that is a good place to begin. What I see happening now, though, is a transition. And I think that the city's in transition, and the role of the local government is going to reflect part of that transition. As I just got through saying, that lots of the nuts and bolts, the mortar and bricks are in place. We've had a fairly rapid filling up of the expectations of our building programs, and the emphasis to date has been to a large degree on the building efforts. But what is happening is that with all of this putting in place of the building blocks, that we are generating a tremendous diversity of demand. Every person in this room has unique individual requirements, and that diversity just spreads itself across the whole spectrum of our city and the region, for that matter. And so one of the challenges that the government, and this city and those different, is going to be facing on a more increasing basis is how do we satisfy and recognize these differing demands that are going to be placed on the community. I think another trend that we're going to see at the local government, which also affects the chambers as well as other interest groups, is that a good majority of our problems that we're seeing today are regional in nature. Transportation, solid waste, just a number of, and some social issues. And they cannot be solved by any one city acting independently. So what we're starting to see, and we'll probably see more, are cooperative efforts, either through single action boards or single action commissions, which will deal with one specific issue. The transportation issue that is just tremendous in this whole region, in fact, in the whole state. We've seen the spawning of the Highway 85 task force, which dealt with the desire to get just the 85 segment through. We've seen the growth of the Golden Triangle, which is a combination of most of the cities that are directly affected in that geographical area in Santa Clara and San Jose. There is a movement on at this point to refashion the entire Transportation Commission to possibly deal with a more broad-based planning effort as opposed to just administering how the buses run. So there are a number of issues at growth, and I think you're going to find that just as the manufacturers group really was developed out of the Golden Triangle area to try and act as a spokesperson for that, there will be other single action or special purpose groups, and I foresee chambers to a large degree doing that. The other area that I think that we're going to start seeing a lot more effort from the community is in the area of social services. There has been, over the last 10 years, a constant erosion from social services being provided at the federal government, down to the state government, down to the county, and you know who's next. And we saw a little bit of that already this year, where in some small granting effort, the county dispersed the funds to cities and said, you give it out to these different agencies. The county's even now trying to get their hands of it. I mean, we have problems now with the homeless and with AIDS that could be tips of icebergs that none of us know what we're going to be dealing with. I mean, I don't think anyone at this point has an idea whether it's a social problem, an economic problem, or what the problems really are and the magnitude. But if they continue to grow and become problems of a much greater magnitude, that we're going to see the local city governments having to deal with that. And that's going to be an area that up to now, particularly the smaller cities, have just been basically non-participating in. And the problems are of a nature that's going to require regional cooperation. No one city can deal with any one of those problems independently. And in fact, if you do deal with it, you tend to put the problem on somebody else's doorstep, and that doesn't really solve the problem, it just transfers it. So those are some of the things that are growing. I think another issue that's immediate and present for both this council and in the very near future is the effect of the land values that have been generated in this community. One of the nice parts about quality of life and a good, healthy city is that the values increase. I mean, I don't think there's any person in this community that would oppose their land values going up. From a city standpoint, when you're trying to provide public services, and particularly in terms of acquiring space, the cost of this land becomes a problem. Historically, the city has had an in lieu fee for park dedication monies to try and build up reserves to be able to pick up recreational facilities or open space when they become available. When those fees were imposed, they were done at best guess on the expected inflation rates and expected costs at the times. The increase in property values have been so great and so rapid that those reserves are just nowhere near available to take care of the open space we have to acquire. And if you look around this community, there is a number of recreational areas that are in private ownership or semi-private ownership or in school ownership, Elaine, that the community enjoys. Well, if for whatever reason the community wants to continue to enjoy that and has to be able to find ways to fund it, our resources today are just not adequate. So one of the challenges that I think this council is going to face immediately is to either restructure the priorities on those open space areas, or if they're going to maintain the open space areas, to find new areas of funding. And it may mean going back to the citizenry and even in terms of a bond election to try and increase the pot of funds that are available to pick up those additional recreational spaces. But I think that is another one of the immediate situations that we're faced. Well, I think I've rambled on long enough. I really appreciate the effort to address this body. Like I said earlier, I think it's a privilege and a pleasure to be on the City Council in Cupertino. and it's been a privilege and a pleasure to address you here today. Thank you very much.
We have a couple of minutes left over. John, maybe you would like to answer some questions, if there are any.
Questions? Yes, David.
What is happening with the resident in Saratoga on stopping 85? What's the decision of that?
Well, the question was, what is happening with the lawsuit that Saratoga has filed to stop the development of 85? The lawsuit that has been filed has been initiated by private citizens, not by the city of Saratoga. And as with anything within our legal process, they have every right to do that, and it has to be given the normal ability to go through the legal channels. The Traffic Authority, who is a legislative body founded by Measure A, which put the other half-cent sales tax to pay for 85, has a legal challenge to that effort that the POE group has put forth. That's the Citizens Saratoga. I can tell you that the elected representatives of Saratoga do not support that lawsuit. So it is that private group that's doing that. Until the court takes a definitive action that would say stop 85, then the lawsuit has no immediate bearing. If the court chose to give them some type of injunction or restraining order until their cause was heard, then it would have an impact. Yes, John.
You have, the city has, I should say, some acreage adjoining the city park, Memorial Park. What are the plans for that? You have some kind of a community center, you plan for that?
Are you speaking where the old orchard is now?
The orchard's there now.
Yes.
Selling.
Yes, there is a community center that is in the presently in the working drawing stage. There are funds through a bond issue or a participation issue that the city has in place, and I could ask Steve, but I think June or July, something like that, we're supposed to start breaking ground out there. Yeah, so somewhere mid-year there will be the groundbreaking ceremonies for the new community center on that location.
Is that all going to be there, just a building or what?
Well, there's a building and the support. There's the parking that goes with the building, and there's some outdoor areas, and then there's, I think, 1 or 2 tennis courts that are going to be expanded from the other direction. And then the space between the existing park and that will be further expanded to just provide more park area. Okay. I think, okay.
Okay. This is all we have time for. As the questions are getting more difficult, maybe, John, I should get you off the hook.
Thank you very much.